Sunday is church family night, 5 o'clock here, auditorium, like normal. The second is we have a decision that we need to make. You guys ready to make a decision tonight? So here are the two options. I am not going to be here next Wednesday because I think I'm going to be in North Carolina, but I'm not sure. I think it's North Carolina, but it might be something close to North Carolina. All right, I'll figure it out by the time I need to go somewhere, okay? But, you don't want to peak too early. So I'm not exactly sure. I don't leave till Monday, and it's only Wednesday now, so I don't have to exactly know where I'm going.
So when you call us from Florida, do we have an explanation?
Yeah, I went too far. You'll know that something went terribly wrong when that happens. So here's the decision. Somebody else can teach the class next Wednesday, or you can decide to come back on the 13th and I'll do the final one.
Isn't that the first night, the next?
Indeed it is.
Who would be teaching instead of you?
I don't know, I haven't figured that out yet.
I guess that is.
But the material will be awesome. I'm just telling you right now, the material will be awesome. So
I think that so we can stay on the schedule with the next class, we're planning on attending. Maybe somebody else.
all right, does everybody agree with that? Or at least most people agree with that? Or some of you don't really give a rip? Okay, great. That's what we're going to do then. I'm going to find somebody. So here's the last one. It's on handling failure. So the last one is going to be on handling failure because everybody fails. Everybody fails in some way, shape, or form. And so that last night will be about handling failure. All right, well, let's pray and get started. Lord, we thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight. Thank you for the joy of knowing Christ. Thank you for the gracious gift of your word, the gift of your spirit. And I thank you for now the opportunity to study and to consider how this subject should impact how we live and function. So we ask for your help in Christ's name. Amen. Okay, the session I want to do today is called Our Words Matter. Our Words Matter. Paul Tripp wrote a book called The War of Words. And in that book, there was one concept that really struck me. He essentially said, every word finds its origin either in God or in Satan. And at first, when I thought about that, it really struck me. Like, I'm not sure I'm totally on board with that because he took out the middle ground. And I want there to be a middle ground. There was no such thing in that book of what you and I might call neutral talk. It just didn't exist. There's either words that originate in God or there are words that originate in Satan. Well, that was interesting to me because I wanted there to be a space where I could say something that wasn't sinful even if Jesus didn't think it was awesome. Don't you want that space? I mean, you want that space where it's not like sinful, it just wasn't amazing. And I think what Tripp did in that book was took out the middle ground. Proverbs 18:21 says, life and death is in the power of the tongue. There's not a lot of middle ground there, is there? Life and death is in the power of the tongue. So I started thinking about my tongue and historically relationships. And the more that I thought about it, the more I was beginning to get convinced that Tripp was on to something. Our speech is more satanic and produces more death than we want to believe. And so I just started thinking back to some of the relationships that I ruined or made very difficult with my words. And as I was reflecting on it, the reason I wanted a middle ground is I was willing to say, I probably didn't say the right thing, but it wasn't sinful. I probably didn't say the right thing, but it wasn't sinful. And I realized that I wanted that space because it made me feel comfortable or satisfied that I didn't do anything wrong. And yet, when I evaluated those relationships, I had to come to the conclusion that, well, if I didn't do anything wrong, then why did they blow up? That doesn't sound like nothing wrong happened. If they blew up, there must have been something that led to them blowing up. So let me tell you one of the stories. It happened when I was in college. And let's just say there was a girl. This is before Stephanie, so it's not Stephanie. So those of you wondering, okay, is this your wife? No, it's not. But I had met this girl when I was, I think, a sophomore, at the beginning of my sophomore year. And the more I got to know her, the more I was convinced that she needed to like me. I liked her, and I thought she really ought to like me too. Except she wasn't exactly on that page. She wasn't on the page of, I think you're awesome. She was more on the page of, you're okay. Yeah, what people now call the friend zone, right? So she's one, I didn't know that phrase at the time, but she was definitely wanting it to be the friend zone, and I was not wanting it to be the friend zone. In fact, I was absolutely convinced that she was completely misunderstanding the will of God for her life. And I would, on occasion, remind her of that fact. Now, it wasn't like aggressive and mean, it was just annoying. And so I remember the day when we were together chatting, and here's what she told me. I hope I never see you ever again in my life. Now, there was all sorts of reasons why I could come to the conclusion that, well, that wasn't very nice, she's got this all wrong, yada, yada, yada. But here was the reality. I had to own the fact that I pushed her to that. I had to own that. Now, as it's turned out, I haven't seen her in 30 years. I do wonder, at every BCTC, I just wonder, when I tell this story, whether she's actually in the audience somewhere and is one day going to come up to me and say, remember me 30 years ago, But it hasn't happened yet. And so, we'll see. Maybe it never will. But I had to own that. I had to say that my words were much worse than I was willing to admit. Now, I'm glad it all happened. I think it was a good lesson for me. I think it was part of God's design to get me moving in the right direction, where ultimately Stephanie and I did meet, and we ultimately got married, had 3 kids, and here we are today. But I do experience at least a little bit of shame over the fact that God had to use my sinful words to lead me to that point rather than godliness to lead me to that point. So why did it have to be that way? And I think the answer, at least for me, was I did it. I pushed like that. And it was wrong. And I did not think very carefully about how my words were influencing the people around me. But if we only paid attention to the satanic or death part of our tongue, then we might conclude that the best thing to do is to just not talk at all. Right? The godly response is just to be quiet. And while there is an element of that we'll look at later, what did the other part of Proverbs 18:21 say? Death and what? Life is in the power of the tongue. death, and life is in the power of the tongue. So if all I do is just not talk, then I don't bring life. Proverbs 18:21 says, I can do two things with my tongue. I can destroy something. I can give life to something. If I just decide, well, I'm not going to talk, then I don't bring life. You say, well, you don't bring death either. True, but I don't bring life. And so communication is a huge topic. And what I've tried to do here is stay away from the 4 rules of communication. Because if I asked you that, many of you would be able to tell me what the 4 rules of communication are. And so we would just be having a conversation about stuff we already know about, where I want to push your understanding in a couple of ways when it comes to communication. The first one, words are always, always, always explained by our heart's desires. Our words flow out of our heart. They do not operate or control anything on their own. So to use the analogy of a tree, our words are a fruit, not a root. And Matthew 12:34 says, you brood of vipers, how can you, being evil, speak what is good? Like, how is that possible? For you who are evil in character, to speak what is good. For the mouth speaks out of that which fills the heart. The mouth speaks out of that which fills the heart. Have you ever heard somebody say, well, I didn't mean to say that? Ever heard that? Have you said it? That's got a big problem. That almost acts as if our words are functioning on their own. But that's not what the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches that our words come from our hearts. In James 4, do you have James 4 on your notes? Okay, James 4, verses 1 and 2 says, what is the source of quarrels and conflicts among you? Isn't that a great question? A lot of people ask, what is the source of my quarrels? I mean, why are we arguing so much? And notice the answer. Is not the source your pleasures which wage war in your members? And the answer to that is, yes, it is. Yes, it is those. That's not how people who struggle with communication tend to think. They think the conflict must be as a result of someone else or something else. It's outside of them. And they're merely a victim of the conflict. People who think like that aren't thinking biblically. And they're not putting themselves in a position where they can really see resolution to those conflicts. Verse 2 explains it in more detail. It's not the source your pleasures that wage war in your members. Yes, it is. Now let's explain it a little bit. He says, you lust and do not have, so you commit murder. This is where Pastor Oakland's saying, you do what you do because you want what you want comes from. So I want something, and therefore I'm willing to go after it. Now, when people see you commit murder, they're like, oh, come on, seriously, commit murder? That's not what happens. But do you remember what Jesus taught about murder? He says, you've heard it said that you shall not commit murder. And everyone's like, yeah, I've heard that. True. And he who commits murder is guilty. Yeah, true. Heard that. He says, but I tell you that he who, and then what he says is like, has anger in his heart toward his brother. He who speaks in aggressive ways, in condescending ways toward his brother, commits murder in his heart. So he brings up, and who wrote James? James. And who's James? Brother of Jesus. You think maybe he might have heard this before? Think maybe he's connecting back to Jesus and his Sermon on the Mount? It's not that we literally commit murder, but we are willing to assassinate people with our words. So we use our words to cut people down, to harm them, to hurt them, because that's what we have available to us. And one of the ways that I can tell if I'm chasing something in my heart that's more important than the Lord is to ask, am I willing to sin in order to get it? Am I willing to sin in order to get it? If I want something, am I willing to sin to get what I want? Or am I willing to say, well, I shouldn't have it, and so therefore I'm not going to choose to sin to get it? Then he says, you're envious and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. This is a slightly different way in which our desires create conflict. This one plays out like this. I can't have what I want because it's dependent on someone else, so I'll make you pay. If you don't give me what I want, I can't make you give it to me. But what I can do is I can make you pay. And so I will do whatever it takes to make you miserable because you were unwilling to give me what I wanted. And this is where our communication comes from. This is where the heart lies. This is where our words originate. So people who say, well, I just want to learn communication skills, without learning the heart behind their communication, are doomed to failure. Just say, well, that's going to work for like 5 minutes. Because that's not how words work. It's like pulling a weed without getting the root. What's going to happen in a week? You got the weed back. That's what communication is like if people only try to put a skill on top of their words. In order to change their communication and to do it biblically, they have to address the desires of their heart. Matthew 15:19 says, for out of the heart come evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witnesses, and slanders. So here are some implications of that. Excuses or minimizing our poor communication will never work. Excuses or minimizing will never work. So here's a few versions of that. Well, I didn't mean to say that. I didn't mean to say that. Yeah, you did. You might not have meant for it to come out of your mouth and for me to hear it, like you were mumbling it or you wanted to mumble it instead. But that is exactly what was in your heart. Or everyone has communication problems. We don't solve things like that. That just says, my problem is normal, back off. Because I got the same problem everybody else has, so therefore we just learn to live with it. What about I'm trying to be helpful? As long as it's the truth. As long as it's the truth. Oh, you're right. I was, what I said was just childish. See, that approach to communication is never going to work. And I want to suggest that's one of the reasons why people argue over things that they say are really silly. Okay, they're not things that somebody has to accuse them of being silly. They would say they're silly. So I have heard of individuals who got in a major conflict over whether or not someone would wear a coat, over a particular hairstyle that a person had, over the fact that a person drinks too much Pepsi. and over the fact that someone eats too little for dinner. I'm not making this up. You think you just made those up. No, I'm not making those up. Like, those are real conflicts that I heard about from real people. Adults.
It sounds like something I would argue with my kids over.
That's exactly what they would say. They would say that they were acting childish. But here's the problem. It may appear silly and childish on the outside, but the desires that are motivating those arguments are very serious. And a lot of times what people want to say is, well, you're right, that was just so silly. I mean, we were just being childish. You're right, we just need to not be childish. That doesn't address the heart. That doesn't address the issues that they wanted so badly that they were willing to fight over a coat. Or they were willing to have a conflict over a hairstyle that a person had. Or a conflict over whether or not somebody drinks too much Pepsi. I mean, they should be drinking Dr. Pepper instead. I mean, like, what in the world? Right? And that seems super childish. But the desires that are motivating those kind of conflicts motivate other things too. Not just that. They motivate other things. And those other things, nobody calls silly or childish. So what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that if we're going to use our words well, we have to take into account the kind of things that we want that lead us to those kinds of conflicts. On the one hand, like, who cares whether somebody wears a coat, right? If it's cold, that's the natural consequences of not wearing a coat, right? Who gives a rip? I mean, if everybody was going to die from living in the cold, no one would live in Canada, right? I mean, they all would have died off, but they didn't. So it's not the issue of being cold, all right? It'll be okay. What if somebody drinks Pepsi? It'll be okay, right? But there's something else that's going on, and that's kind of another implication. Words of death are windows into people's hearts. Words of death are windows into people's hearts. It reveals the kinds of things that they want, the kinds of things that they desire, the kinds of things that they're willing to argue over. And until a person is willing to deal with those, their communication's not going to change. Not for long. There might be a time when they will change for the purpose of trying to win somebody back, trying to smooth over some of the conflicts. But as soon as that wears off, then it's like back on just like it was before. So you know what that requires? That actually connects back to our first week. There's a difference between circumstantial change and personal change. And a person who is unwilling to address the heart issues associated with their communication is not going to experience the personal change that is needed. Skills, which is what people often want to ask about. Can you tell me communication skills? They are helpful and they work as long as the person has a heart to bring life into their relationships. If they still have a heart that is driven towards death-oriented relationships, then adding a skill is not going to make a difference. So I think one of the best ways to start thinking about communication is to say it. I know it always comes from the heart. So if we have a conflict, then we are going to get to the bottom of our hearts. Yes, the circumstance may have been a coat, Or what are we doing with the kids? Can the kids play in the soccer league or not play in the soccer league? Or can we decide to eat at, whatever place instead of whatever place? Whatever the conflict is, it becomes a window into our hearts. And if we're willing to go in that window and ask those real meaningful questions, then we can change and grow in our communication. Now, the second principle I wanted to talk about tonight is intentionality is a larger concept than we think. Now, some of you might be going, what in the world is he talking about? I have ministered to a lot of people who want to talk about what they intended. I didn't mean to say that. I didn't mean to offend you. And so we end up with two people on two different sides, neither of whom are willing to budge. This person says they were offended. This person says, well, I didn't mean to offend you. Yeah, but you offended me. Yeah, but I didn't mean to. Yeah, but you did. But I didn't mean to. And so here we sit. And we don't resolve. We just decide to disagree about how we had our conflict. So this happened to me. I'll tell you a story. Somebody was really upset with me because of something that I said. Now, I wasn't even talking to that person. That person happened to hear what I said to another person and was super offended over what I said. And it was something that I have said, I don't even know how many times. Thousands and thousands of times in my life. First time anybody was ever offended about it. So every ounce of my being wanted to say, that person's just overly sensitive. Every ounce of my being wanted to say, that person needed to believe the best. Every ounce of my being wanted to convince them that they were wrong. Every ounce of their being wanted me to take seriously the words that I used. So we're both in a place where neither one of us is willing to give any ground. Right? I think that person's just being super crazy oversensitive. I wasn't even saying it to you. And besides, I've said this a bazillion times and nobody's been offended before, but now all of a sudden you're going crazy over this. That person's saying, what you're saying is offensive. So how do we break the impasse? And I'd like you to turn to Leviticus chapter 4. I'm going to read a portion of Leviticus 4. I want to start in verse 1. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, saying, If a person sins unintentionally in any of the things which the Lord has commanded them not to be done, and commits any of them. Well, that's interesting. So Leviticus 4 is a passage about a person who unintentionally sins. I thought, okay, I've read this before in my Bible. I know I've read it many times before, but now I'm listening. You ever had that moment where you've read something before, except now you're listening to it instead of just reading it? Okay, Lord, you got my attention. I'm having this battle with intentionality. I'm listening. So verse 3 says, If the anointed priest sins so as to bring guilt on the people, then let him offer to the Lord a bull without defect as a sin offering for the sin he has committed. He shall bring the bull to the doorway of the tent of meeting before the Lord, and he shall lay his hand on the head of the bull and shall slay the bull before the Lord. Okay, now verse 13. Now if the whole congregation of Israel commits error, and the matter escapes the notice of the assembly, and they commit any of these things which the Lord has commanded not to be done, and they become guilty, when the sin which they have committed becomes known, then the assembly shall offer a bull for the herd for a sin offering, and bring it before the tent of meeting. Now verse 22. When a leader sins and unintentionally does any of all of the things which the Lord his God has commanded not to be done, and he becomes guilty, if his sin which he has committed is made known to him, he shall bring for his offering a goat, a male without defect. Now verse 27. Now if any one of the common people sins unintentionally in doing any of the things which the Lord has commanded not to be done, and becomes guilty, if his sin which he has committed is made known to him, then he shall bring for his offering a goat, a female without defect, for his sin which he has committed. And he shall lay his hand on the head of the sin offering, and slay the sin offering at the place of the burnt offering. And you say, okay, help me here connect the dots, right? Well, there are several facts in Leviticus 4 that are all clear regardless of who is involved. The first is that the person didn't know they sinned. So it's not like the person was saying, I'm going to offend the fire out of you, and this is how I'm going to do it. Okay? They didn't know. Number two, someone had to point out their sin. They weren't aware that they sinned in that way. So somebody had to tell them about it. They were going to live their life just happy-go-lucky without even knowing that they had sinned. The third fact is that person's unintentional sin is still sin. And number four, his sin needed to be properly paid for by the appropriate offering. When I read that, I thought, okay, I get it. I get it. Just because someone did not intentionally sin with their words does not mean that they are innocent. It does not mean that it is someone else's problem. And in the case that I'm with me, I think words of death would have been words of dismissal, accusations of sensitivity, or rejecting the offense. Those are all issues of words of death. Words of life, we're owning it, repenting for it, and seeking to change. Just because I didn't intend to offend you does not mean that you shouldn't be offended. It just means that I didn't know that I was doing it, and I wasn't intentionally doing it when I said what I said. I think that's a bigger view of intentionality. And I've used this passage in counseling many times. Because individuals will say to me, well, that's not what I meant. I didn't mean to offend them. And after I hear that over and over and over again, let's go to Leviticus 4. And let's see what God thinks about the unintentional sin. See, if we have the attitude that says, well, you can't be hurt because I didn't intend to hurt you, then where's the place for the unintentional hurt? And I think we took it out, which basically means we cut Leviticus 4 out of the Bible.
Just a quick question. The perception of the offense is something that comes to my mind. You know, there is actually being offended, or just the perception of being offended. So how does that kind of square up with what you're saying?
Well, I can't read whether or not the person's just perceiving it or if they really are. So I have to take them at their word.
Okay.
But I think what I can say,
And I'm not trying to be legalistic, so but I think it's a legitimate question.
what I can say is that just because I own the fact that I unintentionally offended a person doesn't automatically mean that they don't have an issue with sensitivity. It could be that too, right? It could be both. We both got here because of our own issues. I'm suggesting, though, right now, that at least as the one who did the offending, that we ought to see words of life as words of owning it, words of hearing their concern, words of being willing to admit that even if we didn't intend to sin against that person, that it's possible that we actually did sin against that person. And therefore be willing to ask their forgiveness, be willing to investigate our own heart to find out why we responded to them the way we did. Not in the thing that we said, but in our response to them telling us that they were offended. Now I have to go back and ask myself questions about, well, why is it that I responded that way? So my concern with this point is that rather than just simply accusing the other person of being overly sensitive or that's not what we meant, our job is to listen and to discern what may have actually been offensive. I may not have sinned or meant to sin, but that doesn't mean I didn't sin. I can find lots of ways to sin without meaning it. And yet, it's too easy for some of us to say, well, if I didn't mean it, then it must not be true. Words can bring death or they can bring life. They're godly or they're satanic. And I've suggested, first, that our communication struggles originate in our hearts, and then second, that we have a bigger view of intentionality. Now, the third point I would like to focus on is words that build up or edify. Words that build up or edify. It's possible for people to spend too much time trying to avoid the wrong thing and not spending enough time saying the right things. So I think it's good for people in relationships to say, well, we really shouldn't be spending a lot of time arguing or being grumpy with one another. I mean, life is really too short and the Lord doesn't really have an interest in that anyway. So why is it that we would spend our time griping and fussing at one another? But if we are grumpy or a little bit sensitive to others, it may come on the heels of not giving one another enough words of life. So in a marriage, for example, there are times that people spend a fair bit of their lives arguing with one another, being upset with one another over something. And the more that happens, the less time they spend talking about things that are good. So in Ephesians 4:29, it says, "Let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such a word as is good for edification according to the need of the moment, so that it will give grace to those who hear." So do you see how we could take that passage and say, well, we need to especially focus on the things that are going to build up and edify, or to say it in Proverbs 18 language, to bring life into relationships, and not spend very much time talking about things that are going to bring death into that relationship. And I find, just across the board, if I'm talking to somebody who's struggling in their relationship, I will on occasion ask them, Can you tell me the last time that the two of you spent significant time complimenting one another? And you know what the answer almost always is? I can't remember the last time. I can't remember the last time. They can remember the last time they had an argument. They can remember the last time that somebody said something unkind to them. But they don't remember the last time that there were words of life and edification and building up coming into the relationship. And when you have a relationship that doesn't have much of that, it's pretty easy for the words and for the conflicts to continue and to increase. So what I put on your sheet are just 3 different kinds of words that would fit under the category of building up or edifying words. So I use the words affirmation, affection, and security. And I think all of us can admit that words of affirmation, affection, and security will depend on the relationship that you have with that person. We all agree with that? So words of affection between a married couple would be different than the words of affection between people who aren't married. Words of affirmation might be different within the context of a marriage than they would be with a parent-child relationship or with somebody outside the family. But assuming that we all agree that there are different kinds of affirmation and affection and security, let's just take some time to interact on what are some examples of words of affirmation. What would be an example of a word of affirmation?
Thank you.
What's that?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for, and then whatever it might be, making dinner tonight, or cleaning up, or whatever. Okay, what else? Yeah, Steve.
Tell our grandson good job when he does something that he's, worked at and really tried at. Good job.
Okay, yeah, good job. Sometimes parents, people who are close, they spend a lot of time talking about the things that could be improved. And over time, right, things that can be improved, need to be improved, need to be improved, need to be improved. What does the person who needs to be improved think? That they can't do anything right. There's nothing they can actually do right. And that's discouraging, right? That ultimately becomes a word of death. It destroys relationships, doesn't build into them. Okay, good. So just saying, when they do a good job, complimenting the things that are right. Okay, what else?
I appreciate.
Okay, appreciate.
And then fill in the blank.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things that people in close relationships do for one another that often gets neglected. So I'm going to walk over here and I'm going to get on a soapbox for a second. Okay, so you guys ready for my soapbox? This is like free of charge, no tuition for this one. It's just one of the Rob Green soapboxes, okay? I have really struggled with the 5 Love Languages book. It's very popular. A lot of people like it. I blast the fire out of it. If somebody tells me they love the 5 Love Languages book, they just better get ready. Because here it comes. It's going to be a bazooka that flows out of my mouth if I'm not careful. And if I'm really irritated, then we're talking Tomahawk missile is coming out next, okay? Because I find that when people focus on that, they wrap their head around the one thing they think communicates love, and they ignore everything else. And so all the stuff that's ignored is part of life. It's part of doing life together. And so we get sucked into this little small view that you only love me if you provide this, whatever this might be. And we miss all of the ways that people demonstrate love outside of that. one way that I might particularly like or enjoy. And so it's not long then for me to start seeing the relationship through the lens of that person doesn't love me. They don't care about me. And if we did that with God, imagine we did that with God. I mean, my love language is receiving gifts. Okay, so if I don't get a gift from Jesus today, he doesn't love me. I mean, when you think about that, it's like, that's crazy, right? That kind of thinking would be insane to assign that to God. We're supposed to see God in all of his glory, not in one small, tiny speck of it. So why would we see people that way? So, complimenting the things that are right. Okay, what else? And appreciating the things that people do, even if it's not like the most glorious, glamorous thing. I think many stay-at-home moms appreciate being acknowledged for the work they do around the house. And it's not like people necessarily see a lot of it. There's not a lot of change from day to day. But there's a lot of work that goes into making that happen. Or when we're in the throes of parenting little kids, right? When you parent big kids, it's just a little different than parenting little kids. Little kids are just a ball of energy. I mean, just keeping them on track is a bit exhausting, right? I mean, just moving them in one direction is exhausting. And yet there are times when there are younger moms who would say they've really struggled with their husband because they can't remember the last time their husband thanked them for the work that they're doing with their child. And so they become very frustrated and bitter over these lack of words of life. Okay? Someone else. Words of affirmation.
You're very good at, like, whatever,
Okay?
pointing out strengths.
Pointing out strengths. As opposed to just weaknesses, right? Well, you're, for the most part, you're all right. But, here it comes, right? No, not that, yeah. Okay, good. What else?
I would say like don't give up, or like encouraging somebody to keep, like, that was a great try.
Okay. You can do it.
Yeah.
You got this
Yeah.
kind of thing. It was, when we took Samuel to Cedarville, they had a series of lectures for the parents. And one of them was a series of college parents who had been parents of college kids for a while. So they were, let's say they had 4 kids, now it's their 4th one is in school. And they were giving, especially parents whose kids were just going to college, some words of advice. And one of them said that he committed himself to sending a text like, "You got this." That was his phrase. You got this. To his son on a regular basis. Like, before he said anything else, that was the text. And it was to highlight what you're getting at. You can do it. I believe in you. I trust that you're going to do well. Instead of just talking about, hey, here it comes, Dad needs to talk to you about this, and Dad needs to talk to you about that, and Dad needs to talk to you about this over here. It was a series of very positive comments that built up their son. Good. Okay, what about words of affection? What would examples of words of affection be? Okay, I love you. I remember talking to somebody who said they literally couldn't remember the last time they heard their spouse say that. Okay, good. What else?
You're awesome.
Okay, you're awesome. You're awesome. All right.
You look pretty.
Okay, you look pretty.
Handsome.
I think especially in marriages and relationships that are moving toward marriage, those things are appropriate and important. The last thing you want is for somebody else to be doing that, right? one of my friends was just going to the doctor. I'm sure this was not appropriate, but like one of the techs was hitting on him, and we were just laughing about it. How was your doctor's appointment? Well, I got a nurse's phone number. Like how funny is that? And it just was one of those moments where it really ought to be coming from the right sources, right? Coming from the right sources. I don't know what she was telling her husband. Hopefully she didn't have one, but who knows? Who knows? Okay, what else? Words of affection. Yeah.
Did you say okay or yes?
Okay. All right.
Something that, that you want to do that, in this case, it's a bench that my in-laws gave her from the barn. And I'm thinking by the time they're packing it into the car, that thing's falling apart. What am I going to do with this? It's work when I get back home, right? And so I keep hearing these hints about for my birthday. Okay.
Okay, good. Good. What about words of security?
I care.
Okay, good.
I got it.
Okay.
Take care of something.
Mm-hmm.
Or they already did, and you don't have to worry about it later.
All right. All right, good.
Well, instead of you got this, you might hear, I've got this other thing instead of.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, you're safe here.
It matters to me.
Okay, good.
You.
Okay, good. It matters. Jared?
There's a sense of security when someone tells me that they're praying for me.
Okay, that they're praying for me. Okay, good. One other that I had that you didn't hit so far was we're in this together. We're in it together. This isn't a you have to endure it thing or I have to endure it thing. It's we're in it together thing. So Amanda was talking earlier about nursing school. And nursing school is challenging, and usually people are good at some things and struggle at others. It's just a normal thing. My wife went through nursing school, and let's just say there was a class or two that I learned a lot about. And that's because you were kind of in it together. It wasn't, yeah, she was earning the degree, but it's not like it was just completely separated from my life. There was a component of that education that certainly impacted me, and there were certain aspects of that education that I could assist with. So those are all things that are part of what it really means to edify. And I wanted to put this one down as the third one to emphasize that we need to speak life-giving words, not just think them. So catch that. We don't just think them, we say them. And I was chatting with somebody not all that long ago, and we ended up having a little conversation about whether or not the person was encouraging. And they said, now that you're asking me about it, I don't know that I've ever said those things. I believe them, but I don't know that I've ever said them. And it was like a light bulb went off in their own mind that, whoa, I guess you're right. I guess I haven't actually said those words. I've thought them, I've believed them, but they haven't come out of my mouth. And so that person said, well, I need to do a better job at speaking the words, not just thinking them. Okay, point number 4, last one for tonight. It's best to say less rather than more. I think that's a helpful thing. Now, we're not going to the extreme, right? Because if we go to the extreme and we say, well, I don't want to commit any words of death, so I'm not going to say anything at all, then we sacrifice the words of life that the passage emphasizes too. So we can't go to the I'm not going to say anything position. We have to focus on the words of life position. However, we also ought to be cautious about our words of death. Proverbs 10:19 says, when there are many words, transgression is unavoidable. But he who restrains his lips is wise. I struggle to understand how that verse can possibly apply to a pastor. I mean, isn't that true? I mean, as pastors, we spend a lot of time with our voice. So this is like a double whammy. Like on the one hand, you got to talk a lot, and on the other hand, you just have to somehow not sin talking a lot. And yet, the more you talk, the more likely it is that you're going to sin. Right? It's one of those really touchy things. That's probably why James 3 says, don't be a teacher, unless God just absolutely compels you to be one. Right? Don't be one unless God compels you to be one. Because you have to face this issue. Where there are many words, transgression is unavoidable. Now, I put a few others on here to emphasize this concern for our speech. Proverbs 21:9, it's better to live on the corner of a roof than in a house shared with a contentious woman. Pretty powerful verse there, right? 10 verses later, Proverbs 21:19, it says, it is better to live in a desert land than with a contentious and vexing woman. So it's almost like when you read verse 9 and you say, man, I mean, I live with a woman who is just contentious. I mean, she just argues about everything. So you go take your mat and you go put it on the corner of your roof. And back then, they had flat roofs, right? So not like our steep ones, okay? So you don't roll over and fall off the roof, right?
Everybody's like, hey, Johnny, how you doing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Susie got a little lippy today, didn't she? But 10 verses later, it says it's better to go live in a desert land. So if you catch him out in the wilderness on the way into town, like, oh, last night was worse, huh? You took your mat up last night and you still heard her yakking. So you're like, I'm out of here, right? There's a piece that's, boy, we have to be careful about that. Proverbs 27:15 says, a constant dripping on a day of steady rain and a contentious woman are alike.
Is everything okay at home, Rob?
We'll get to the guys in a second.
I'm back here waiting on that one. What are you talking about? No, wait a minute.
Proverbs 26:21. Like charcoal to hot embers and wood to fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. So both sides get it, right? Both sides get it. Men and women are fully capable of using their tongues in order to manipulate and to fight and quarrel and contend with those around them.
So I'm just curious, you think the women are going up on the roof too?
And it doesn't say, but I imagine a few of them are looking to run out of the house, that's for sure.
But just think about it, you have all these men on the roof, and then, then the women start going up on the roof. So then the contention continues.
Yeah, no doubt. Jared painted quite a scene for us there, didn't he? It just keeps running now. Hey, Joe! Yo, dude! Rough day today. Hope tomorrow's better. Oh, John! Hey, what's up? Yeah, it's quite a picture. But I think what happens for many of us is that we learn at some point in our lives that we're not going to get our way simply by being physically aggressive. We might be able to get away with that, when we're younger on the playground and that sort of thing. But at some point we realize that physical aggression creates big problems as adults. And so we learn that, we have to find a new way. And the way we often find it is with our words. I'm not going to get what I want because I'm going to make you give me what I want. I'm going to get what I want because I'm going to make you miserable until you give me what I want. And I'm going to make you miserable with my words. And so each of us have to wrestle with, I have to be judicious and careful with the words that I use. And you say, well, wait a minute, isn't that sort of in contrast to the words to speak? And the answer is yes. But I think one of the most important words in the Bible, that's actually not in the English language, that's not found in the Bible, is the word tension. And that is, the Bible places a lot of things in tension with one another. How do I speak and not sin? How do I, let's say with finances, how do you plan without hoard? How do you handle all of your responsibilities without sacrificing any of them? The Bible's full of tension. One thing leads to tension in another thing. And here's another example. And I think tension pushes us in the direction of dependence, and it pushes us in the direction of wisdom. As we wrestle with our words, that yes, I need to speak, because I need to give words of life. But I also have to be careful. I see the passages. Contentiousness is found in the Bible. Using a lot of words is cautioned against in the Bible, because the Bible, God knows that the more we talk, the more likely it is that we'll sin in our speech. The more likely it is that we'll become contentious with one another. And so I have to wrestle with, when is it best for me to not say anything? James 1:19 says, be quick to hear, and what? Slow to speak. And slow to become angry, because the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. Interesting connection there. Be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to become angry, because the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. It's almost like speaking and anger go together. And James 1:19 says, be quick to hear. So there are times when the best thing to do is to remain quiet and listen, as opposed to try to speak into the situation. And for some of us, we have to learn that skill, right? Have you noticed that in family relationships, there are some people who love to tell the story in painstaking detail? I mean, painstaking detail. It takes forever. And at the end of 15 minutes, you're just like, your eyes are glossed over. And you don't even remember what started this conversation, because this person just went on and on and on and on. And every fiber of your being is like, could you just tell me the bottom line? And then there are other people, right? The same person who is the one who likes to tell the story in all of its detail wants you to tell your stories in all of its detail. And you say it in one sentence, and they're like, no, I want to hear more. There isn't any more. No, there has to be more. I told you a 15-minute story. I know you did. That's why I don't need to tell you any of my story. Right? When we get into those situations, the temptation is just to be frustrated by that, where what God says, be quick to hear. After all, he gave us 2 ears and only 1 mouth. So we got to spend our time listening. And if we don't listen, then what does that communicate to the person who's trying to talk? I don't care. Not important. And that communicates a message all its own. All right, so our words matter. I was trying to do something different than just the 4 rules of communication, because I suspected many of you would be able to name them on command, like you know them by heart and have worked to practice them in your life. These 4, taking it to another level. Remembering it comes from our heart. Not using, well, I didn't mean it, to say that I don't have any responsibility. To emphasize speaking words of life. And then to consider when it's best just to stay quiet. Because Proverbs 18:21 says, life and death are in the power of the tongue. All right, any questions? Yeah?
Where does tone of voice fit in this? Because we have 2 teenagers now, and we're just starting that teenage thing.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes what they say isn't the problem, it's how they said it.
Mm-hmm.
Like the huffy attitude, or, I don't know, you know.
I do. Yeah, and I think it comes from all of us.
Yeah.
Right? I've said a few things with a huffy attitude before. And what is going on? There's something going on in the heart. And if I'm going to get to what's going on in that teenager's life, I don't just stop at the words that they say. Communication is a fruit of the desires of their heart, which is the root. So I see tone of voice. Now I think I have to be careful.
Right, because you don't want to assume.
Because tone, body language isn't necessarily automatically clear what that means, but I certainly can ask about it. Hey, you seemed pretty short with me. Can you help me understand that? And maybe it has a very simple explanation. Maybe that question will spark a conversation about what's really bothering them. Good question. I think generally speaking, we ought to read halo data. That is nonverbal. You guys ever heard like 90% of communication is nonverbal? I don't buy that. I think what nonverbal communication does is give us the opportunity to ask questions about what's going on in a person's life, not assume we know what that nonverbal thing meant. And I'll tell you another story from our seminary students. I ask them on a regular basis to present stuff. So that I have an assignment and then they need to present it. Well, there were times when I'm sitting in the back of the room and I'm concentrating on what they're saying. I'm looking at their paper as they're presenting, and I'm deciding, making valuation judgments right then and there. And the guys told me, this is a miserable experience. I said, what are you talking about? They're like, you look like we're idiots. And you can't believe that we're actually in your class and you're irritated at us. And I said, oh, that's not true at all. And he said, well, it looks like it. And I said, well, I was just paying close attention to what you were saying. I was just concentrating. I mean, you were giving me some ideas I needed to think about. And they're like, well, could you please tell your face that's really awesome and amazing? Because right now what your face looks like is, I can't believe how much of an idiot I am. Okay, so tell your face something else. So I think when we have these nonverbal things, we need to at least ask the question and be sure that we understand what's going on. Steve?
The nonverbal signs, when I walk in the door from work, my wife will look at me and say, you had a bad day. And she's read the whole thing all the way in from the door from the time I pulled in the driveway. And you could write a paper, but she's already figured out that. So that's one of those you gotta be careful.
And sometimes she's right.
Yeah, she's right.
And sometimes not. Right?
Sometimes it's just, I got out of the car the wrong way and I walked with my face looking at the ground or whatever she saw, and at that point she made assumptions.
Exactly. I was looking at a bug. I'm not mad, I'm looking at a bug. And then another day, you're like, no, you're right, I am mad. Here's why. And yeah. All right, let's pray. Lord, thank you so much for our time. And thank you for the possibility of thinking about your word and how our words actually matter. And thank you for a passage like Proverbs 18 that reminds us life and death is in the power of the tongue. And I pray that you would help us to use our words positively, that it would bring and generate life in relationships. So we're asking for your help. We pray as well for the week that's still ahead and ask that you would help us to serve you well, to live as if Jesus is alive and important to us, and to function in a way that would honor Christ and draw people to a saving knowledge of him. So we ask in Jesus' name, amen. All right, Lord bless you.